I never thought the people who were supposed to love me the most would be the ones to destroy me. But there I was, staring at my phone screen at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, watching my entire world crumble with a single email notification. The meeting room fell silent around me as I read the subject line: urgent, beneficiary, change request for the Margaret Vance Trust Fund. My grandmother's name felt like a punch to my gut. The email was from First National Bank of Chicago, requesting immediate confirmation of an appointment I had never scheduled. My hands started trembling as I fumbled to excuse myself from the quarterly design review that had suddenly become completely irrelevant. "I'm sorry. I have to take this," I mumbled to my confused colleagues, grabbing my laptop bag and rushing toward the elevator. The 20-minute drive to the bank felt like an eternity, my mind racing through possibilities, none of them good. Grandma Margaret had left me everything when she passed 2 years ago, much to my parents' obvious disappointment. At 28, I had been managing the substantial trust responsibly, using it to build my graphic design business and invest in my future, just as she would have wanted. The banking floor was bustling with afternoon activity, but I barely noticed as I marched straight to the customer service desk. "I need to speak with someone about the Margaret Vance Trust immediately," I told the representative, my voice sharper than intended. She made a few calls before directing me to the executive floor, where I was escorted to a conference room I had never seen before. Nothing could have prepared me for what I found when that door opened. My parents, Richard and Eleanor Vance, sat around the polished mahogany table like they owned the place. Beside them was a man in an expensive suit I didn't recognize, and across from them sat Mrs. Patterson, the branch manager I had worked with many times before. But it was the thick manila folder bearing my name that made my blood run cold. "Julie? Honey. Thank goodness you're here," my mother said, standing up with that concerned expression she had perfected over the years. "We've been so worried about you." My father remained seated, his stern businessman demeanor in full effect. "Sit down, sweetheart. We need to talk about some concerning developments." "What developments?" I demanded, remaining standing. "And who is this?" I gestured toward the stranger. "This is Dr. Harrison," my father said calmly. "He's a psychiatrist who's been reviewing your case." "My case?" The words came out louder than I intended. "What case? I don't have a case." "Doctor." Harrison opened the folder and began reading in a clinical tone that made my skin crawl. "Based on the documented evidence provided by your family, Miss Vance, you've been exhibiting signs of paranoid delusions, short-term memory loss, and erratic financial behavior. These symptoms, combined with your family's testimony about your recent isolation and mood swings, suggest you may no longer have the mental capacity to manage substantial financial assets." The room started spinning. "That's completely insane. There's nothing wrong with me." "See?" my mother said to Dr. Harrison, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "This is exactly what we've been talking about. She gets so defensive and angry when we try to help." Mrs. Patterson looked uncomfortable but continued the meeting. "Your parents have provided medical documentation and sworn statements about their concerns for your well-being. They're requesting to be named as co-trustees of your grandmother's trust, temporarily, until you can get the help you need." I snatched the folder from the table and flipped through it frantically. There were medical forms with my forged signature, bank statements I had never seen, and even photos of me that had been taken without my knowledge, annotated with notes about my erratic behavior at coffee shops and grocery stores. The level of planning and deception was breathtaking. "This is fraud," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "Every signature on these forms is fake." I've never been to see Dr. Harrison in my life. And these bank statements are completely fabricated. Julie. Please. My father said with infuriating patience. You're having another episode. This is exactly why we're here. I looked at Mrs. Patterson, desperately hoping for an ally. You know me. I've been managing this account perfectly for 2 years. I've never missed a payment. Never made any questionable transactions. How can you possibly believe this? She looked genuinely torn. I'm sorry. Julie. But I have to follow bank protocol when family members express concerns about mental competency. We'll need to suspend access to the account until this can be resolved through proper legal channels. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. These people had been planning this for months, maybe years, documenting my every move, creating an elaborate fictional narrative about my mental state. And now they were going to steal everything my grandmother had left me. You will all pay for this, I said, backing toward the door. Every single one of you. I stormed out of the conference room, their voices calling after me as I practically ran through the bank lobby. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely start my car. I needed help. And I needed it fast. The first person I called was Marcus, my best friend since college and the only lawyer I truly trusted. When he answered, I could barely get the words out. Marcus. They're trying to steal everything. My parents. They've fabricated medical records. They're claiming I'm mentally incompetent. They just froze my access to Grandma's trust. There was a long pause before Marcus responded, his voice serious. Julie. Listen to me carefully. If they have documentation claiming mental incompetency, they're not just after financial control. With the right legal maneuvering, they could have you committed involuntarily. You need to get somewhere safe. And you need to do it now. The parking garage suddenly felt threatening. Every footstep echoed ominously. And I found myself checking my rearview mirror constantly as I drove home to my downtown Chicago apartment. Once inside, I deadbolted the door and called Marcus back. What do I do? I asked, pacing frantically around my living room. First, we need to document everything. Take photos of all your medical records, bank statements, anything that proves you're of sound mind. Second, we need to figure out what legal documents they've already filed. This kind of coordinated effort suggests they've been working with lawyers for a while. As if on cue, my phone rang. It was my younger brother Tyler. Hey. Julie, he said. And something in his tone immediately put me on alert. I just talked to Mom and Dad. They told me what happened at the bank today. And? Look. I think maybe you should just go along with this for a while. Just until things calm down. They're really worried about you. And honestly, some of the things they've told me have me concerned too. My heart sank. Tyler had been my closest ally growing up. The one person in our family who had always supported my dreams and defended me against our parents' criticism. If they had gotten to him too, I was truly alone. What things? Tyler, what exactly did they tell you? Just, how you've been acting lately. The paranoia. The mood swings. Maybe some professional help wouldn't be the worst thing. I hung up without another word. The betrayal from Tyler hurt almost worse than everything else combined. My own brother, whom I had supported through college and helped start his business, was now part of their conspiracy. That evening, Around 9 o'clock. My doorbell started ringing insistently. I looked through the peephole and felt my blood turn to ice. My father stood in the hallway with Dr. After Harrison and two large men in white uniforms with Riverside Mental Health Services emblazoned on their shirts. "Julie, we know you're in there," my father called through the door. "We have a court order for a mental health evaluation. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I scrambled for my phone and called Marcus again, whispering frantically. "They're here. They're trying to take me to some mental health facility. They claim they have a court order." "Do not open that door," Marcus said firmly. "I'm calling 911 right now. If they had a legitimate court order, they would have police officers with them, not private security. Stay on the line with me." The men outside started trying to force the door, and I could hear them discussing whether to call a locksmith. Just as I was starting to panic, I heard new voices in the hallway, authoritative and commanding. "This is the Chicago Police Department. Step away from the door and show us your documentation." Marcus had worked his magic. Within minutes, the officers had determined that my father's group had no legal authority to enter my apartment or take me anywhere. In the confusion that followed, with my father arguing loudly with the police about family intervention rights, Marcus appeared at my back door. "We need to go. Now," he said. "Grab your laptop, your important documents, and anything else you absolutely need. You can't stay here tonight." I threw some clothes and my grandmother's jewelry into a bag, grabbed my laptop and the bank folder I had stolen earlier, and followed Marcus down the back stairs of my building into the alley where his car was waiting. "Where are we going?" I asked as we drove through the empty streets of downtown Chicago. "My office. We have work to do." Marcus's law firm occupied 3 floors of a sleek building in the Loop. After midnight, it was completely deserted, which made it the perfect place to spread out all the documents and figure out what we were dealing with. Marcus made coffee while I laid out everything on the conference room table like pieces of a puzzle. "This is sophisticated," Marcus said, examining the forged documents under his desk lamp. "They've been planning this for at least a year. Look at these dates. They started collecting evidence of your mental instability just 3 months after your grandmother died. We worked through the night, and the picture that emerged was terrifying. My parents had hired a private investigator to follow me, photograph me, and document any behavior that could be interpreted as unusual. They had befriended my neighbors to gather gossip. They had even gotten information from my gym about my workout schedule and eating habits, somehow spinning my healthy lifestyle into evidence of obsessive control issues. "There's something else," Marcus said around 5 in the morning. "The timing of all this is very specific. Your grandmother's will had a provision that if you died or were declared mentally incompetent before age 30, the trust would revert to your father. They're not just trying to control your money, Julie. They're trying to take it completely." As the sun came up over Lake Michigan, visible through the conference room windows, Marcus made a suggestion that changed everything. "Your grandmother was a smart woman. She knew your father's character better than anyone. I think we need to talk to her original lawyer, the one who drafted her will. If she was concerned about something like this happening, she might have built in some protections we don't know about." Richard Blackwood had been my grandmother's attorney for over 30 years. His office was in an old brownstone building in Lincoln Park, filled with the kind of heavy furniture and law books that spoke of decades of serious legal work. When we arrived that afternoon, I was surprised to find that he had been expecting us. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman, Mr. Blackwood said after Marcus and I had explained the situation and shown him the evidence. "She came to see me about 6 months before she died. very concerned about some conversations she had overheard between your parents. She asked me to prepare something, just in case. He disappeared into his office and returned with a small safe, which he opened with a combination that was apparently my grandmother's birthday. Inside was a sealed envelope with my name on it and a small digital recording device. She left specific instructions that these were only to be given to you if there was evidence that your parents were attempting to misappropriate your inheritance through fraudulent means. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. The letter inside was written in my grandmother's careful handwriting. My dearest Julie, if you are reading this, then my worst fears have come true. Your father has always been driven by greed rather than love, and I have long suspected he would try to find a way to take what I've left you. The recording device contains conversations I secretly recorded during his last few visits to me before I died. I installed a recording system in my home after he started pressuring me to change my will. What you'll hear will be difficult, but it will also be your protection. There is also a codicil to my will that your father doesn't know about. Mr. Blackwood will explain everything. Be strong. My dear. You are worth so much more than their manipulation would have you believe. The recording device contained 3 hours of audio that made me sick to my stomach. My father's voice, clear and unmistakable, talking to my mother about how they could handle the Julie problem after Grandma died. There were discussions about finding a corrupt psychiatrist, planning ways to isolate me from my friends, and even conversations about having me committed long-term so they could access the trust permanently. But the most devastating recording was a conversation between my father and Tyler, where my father promised my brother $50,000 if he would help them gather evidence of my mental instability and support their story when the time came. Mr. Blackwood explained the codicil my grandmother had added to her will. It stated that if there was ever evidence that Richard or Eleanor Vance attempted to fraudulently gain control of my inheritance, their own inheritance from my grandmother's estate would be immediately revoked and donated to charity. Moreover, they would be barred from any future claim on the family estate. Your grandmother was very thorough, Mr. Blackwood said with a slight smile. She also set up a separate account with enough money to fund a legal battle against anyone who tried to steal from you. She suspected this day would come. Armed with this new evidence, Marcus and Mr. Blackwood crafted a plan. We would arrange a meeting with my parents and Dr. Harrison, ostensibly to discuss the terms of their trusteeship, but actually to confront them with the evidence of their fraud. The meeting was set for the following Friday at Mr. Blackwood's office. My parents arrived looking confident and victorious, with Dr. Harrison in tow and another man I didn't recognize, who turned out to be their lawyer. I hope Julie is ready to accept the help she needs, my mother said to Mr. Blackwood as they settled into the conference room. Oh, we have some very interesting things to share with you today, Mr. Blackwood replied pleasantly. I think you'll find this meeting quite educational. He started by playing the recording device. As my father's voice filled the room, describing in detail how they planned to make Julie look crazy enough that no judge would trust her with money. The color drained from both my parents' faces. The recording included my father instructing Dr. Harrison on exactly what diagnosis to give me, and even promising him additional payment if he could recommend long-term residential treatment. It included my mother practicing her concerned mother act in preparation for the bank meeting. When the recording ended, the room was completely silent except for the sound of my mother's quiet crying. Mr. Blackwood continued methodically. Now, let's discuss the codicil to Margaret Vance's will that none of you knew about. He read the relevant sections aloud, explaining that every dollar my parents had inherited from my grandmother would now be donated to mental health awareness charities in my name. Furthermore, the evidence of their fraud had already been submitted to the State Bar Association, the Illinois Department of Public Health, and the FBI's white-collar crimes unit. Dr. Harrison. Mr. Blackwood said, turning to the psychiatrist who looked like he wanted to disappear. You'll be interested to know that fabricating mental health diagnoses is a federal crime when used in financial fraud schemes. I expect you'll be hearing from law enforcement very soon. My father finally found his voice. This is ridiculous. Julie is our daughter. We were trying to help her. I stood up and looked directly at him. You were trying to steal from me. You manipulated Tyler. You bribed a doctor. You forged documents. And you stalked me for over a year. That's not help. Dad. That's criminal conspiracy. Tyler, who had been silent throughout the meeting, suddenly broke down sobbing. I'm so sorry. Julie. They promised me the money for my student loans. They said you were really sick and that I was helping you by going along with their plan. I didn't know how bad it was until I heard those recordings. The legal proceedings that followed were swift and decisive. Dr. Harrison lost his medical license permanently. My parents were charged with fraud, conspiracy, and forgery. Their lawyer, who turned out to have been aware of the illegal nature of their scheme, was disbarred. Tyler pled guilty to his role in the conspiracy but received probation and community service. Partly because he agreed to testify against our parents, and partly because the judge recognized he had been manipulated by them as well. The media coverage was extensive. Prominent Chicago family charged in elaborate financial fraud scheme ran in the Tribune for 3 days. My parents, who had always been obsessed with their social standing, were completely humiliated. 6 months later, I stood in the spacious new office of the Margaret Vance Foundation, a nonprofit organization I had established to help young adults who were victims of financial abuse by family members. The foundation provided legal assistance, counseling services, and emergency financial support to people in situations similar to what I had experienced. The view from my office window looked out over Grant Park, and on clear days I could see Lake Michigan stretching to the horizon. My design business had grown substantially, partly because the media attention had brought me new clients who admired my story of resilience. Marcus stopped by one afternoon with coffee and the final legal documents. It's official, he said, setting the papers on my desk. Your parents' appeal has been denied. They'll both serve at least 2 years in prison. And they'll have to pay full restitution to the foundation. Tyler had also come to see me the week before. Our relationship was slowly healing, but it would never be the same. He was working 2 jobs to pay for his own counseling and had volunteered to speak at one of the foundation's workshops about how family members can become complicit in financial abuse. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, he had said, but I want to spend the rest of my life making up for what I did. As I looked out at the city below, I reflected on how much my life had changed. I had lost the family I thought I had, but I had gained something much more valuable: the knowledge that I was strong enough to fight for myself and win. The foundation had already helped over 200 people escape financial abuse situations. And every success story felt like a victory not just for them, but for my grandmother's memory. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Dinner tonight? I'm buying. To celebrate your 1-year freedom anniversary. I smiled and typed back, absolutely. I have so much to celebrate. That evening, as I locked up the foundation office and headed home to my new apartment in Lincoln Park, I realized that my parents had inadvertently given me the greatest gift of all. By trying to destroy me, they had forced me to discover just how strong I really was. I wasn't just the granddaughter who had inherited money anymore. I was Julie Vance, founder of a successful nonprofit, owner of a thriving business, and someone who had proved that no matter how elaborate the conspiracy against you, the truth will always find a way to emerge. The irony wasn't lost on me that in their greed to take everything from me, my parents had ended up losing everything themselves. But more importantly, their actions had led me to find my true purpose, protecting others from experiencing what I had endured. Some people might say I should feel sorry for them, sitting in their prison cells, having lost their home, their reputation, and their freedom. But I don't. They made their choices. And those choices revealed who they really were. My choice was to build something positive from the wreckage they had created. And that choice revealed who I really was too. As I walked through the Chicago evening, surrounded by the sounds of a city full of life and possibility, I knew that my grandmother would be proud. Not just because I had protected her legacy, but because I had finally learned to protect myself.